The wind howled like a wounded animal across the Montana plains that October afternoon in 1884. Dust swirled thick and mean, turning the sky the color of old blood. Nora Hayes stepped down from the train at Silver Creek, her boots hitting the wooden platform with a hollow thud. Her gloved hand clutched the worn carpet bag so tight her knuckles ached. Inside lay everything she owned now. A few faded dresses, a worn Bible, and that last letter from Boone Maddox promising a new life. She drew a shaky breath. The air tasted of iron and dry earth. After months of rattling rails and sleepless nights, this was supposed to be the end of the running. A fresh start. A husband waiting. A home. Instead, a sharp crack split the air. Not thunder. A gunshot. Nora's head snapped up. 3 riders thundered toward the platform, dust boiling behind their horses like smoke from hell itself. The lead man raised his pistol again, his voice cutting through the wind like a whip. "Get back on that train, woman. Silver Creek don't need no more land-grabbing females." Another shot rang out. This one didn't miss. Pain exploded in Nora's left shoulder, hot and vicious like someone had driven a branding iron straight through flesh and bone. Her legs buckled. The bag slipped from her fingers and thudded into the dirt. She hit the ground hard. Dust choked her throat. Blood warm and sticky soaked fast through her gray traveling dress. The world tilted, blurred at the edges. Voices shouted. Boots pounded wood. Someone laughed, a cruel barking sound that made her stomach twist. Not again, her mind screamed. Not like Chicago. Not like watching Thomas die coughing blood while the creditors took everything. She tried to push herself up, but her arm refused. A sob caught in her throat. This was supposed to be her chance, her last chance. Hooves pounded closer. Then, another sound. Different. Heavier boots running fast across the platform. A man's voice, low and urgent, cut through the chaos. "Stay down." Strong arms scooped her up before she could even scream. One moment she was bleeding into the dust. The next she was pressed against a solid chest that smelled of leather sweat and sagebrush. The man moved like the wind itself fast, sure shielding her body with his own, as more shots cracked behind them. Nora's head lolled against his shoulder. Through the haze of pain, she caught a glimpse of his face. Square jaw, storm gray eyes, narrowed in fury dust, clinging to dark hair beneath a battered black hat. He didn't speak again. He just ran carrying her like she weighed nothing, dodging between crates and startled horses while bullets whined past. Her vision swam. Every jolt sent fresh fire through her shoulder. She wanted to tell him to put her down to save himself, but the words wouldn't come. Only a broken whisper escaped. "Why?" He didn't answer. His grip only tightened, careful yet fierce, as if letting go wasn't an option. Behind them, the riders cursed and wheeled their horses, but the man never slowed. He rounded the corner of the freight office and ducked into a narrow alley, boots skidding on loose gravel. Nora's breath came in shallow gasps. The pain was swallowing her whole, now pulling her under like dark water. Yet somewhere in the fog, a strange thought flickered. He didn't hesitate. Not like the others back east who turned away when her husband got sick. Not like the men who saw a widow with nothing and kept walking. This stranger had run straight into flying lead. For her. Cole Mercer's heart hammered against his ribs as he kicked open the side door of the old livery stable. He lowered the woman gently onto a pile of clean straw, his hands already moving to press a bandana against the bleeding wound. Blood. Too much blood. Her face was pale as winter milk lips, trembling. Those wide hazel eyes locked on his for one brief, terrified second before fluttering half closed. are you?" she whispered, voice cracking like thin ice. "Cole Mercer," he said, voice rough as gravel. "And you're not dying today. Not on my watch." Outside, the riders' shouts faded into the howling wind. But Cole knew this wasn't over. Rancher Holt's men didn't scare easy. And this woman, whoever she was, had just stepped off the train into a war she didn't even know existed. Nora Hayes closed her eyes, the letter from a dead man still crumpled in her fist. Pain throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Fear coiled tight in her chest, but beneath it all, something small and stubborn flickered to life. She had survived worse. And this man, this Cole Mercer, had just caught her before she fell. This story is about turning the deepest wounds and cruelest injustices into quiet, unbreakable strength. It will show you that sometimes the person who saves you isn't a hero on a white horse, but a scarred man willing to stand in the storm beside you. And that real hope is born not when life is easy, but when you choose to rise anyway. The smell of carbolic acid and wood smoke pulled Nora Hayes back from the darkness. She woke slowly, every breath a careful, painful thing. The ceiling above her was rough-hewn logs, warm lamplight flickering across them. Not the livery stable, not the dusty street. A real house. A soft voice spoke beside her. "Easy now, child. You're safe." Nora turned her head. An older woman with kind gray eyes and silver-streaked hair sat in a wooden chair folding clean bandages. Mrs. Lila Crane. She had introduced herself gently while Doc Harlan worked on the wound earlier, though Nora's memory of those hours remained blurred with pain and chloroform. "Where?" "Am I Nora?" whispered. Her voice sounded thin like dry leaves. "Cole Mercer's house," Mrs. Crane answered, laying a cool cloth across Nora's forehead. "He brought you here straight after Doc Harlan took that bullet out in the old supply tent. You've been sleeping most of the day." Nora closed her eyes for a long moment. The letter. She still had the letter. Her fingers searched weakly beneath the quilt until they found the crumpled paper tucked against her side. She unfolded it with trembling hands and read the words again, the ones that had carried her all the way from Chicago. "Dearest Nora, I await your arrival in Silver Creek. A good life waits for us here." A bitter laugh tried to rise in her throat, but came out as a broken sound instead. Mrs. Crane noticed. She sighed softly. "Boone Maddox has been dead 3 months, dear. Fever took him last summer. Rancher Holt and his men have been using his name to write to widows and single women back east. They lure them here, then scare them off, or worse, so the women never claim the land that was promised." Nora stared at the letter until the ink blurred. Another lie. Another man's name used like a trap. First Thomas, her husband, coughing his life away while creditors stripped their home bare. Now this. She had traveled halfway across the country carrying nothing but hope and a dead man's promise. She felt hollow. Used. The same cold shame she had carried out of Chicago now settled heavier in her chest. "I need to leave," she said suddenly, trying to sit up. Pain flared sharp across her shoulder, and she gasped, clutching the quilt. Mrs. Crane gently pressed her back down. "You're not strong enough to go anywhere yet. And Cole won't hear of it." As if summoned by his name, the front door opened. Heavy footsteps crossed the wooden floor. Cole Mercer stepped into the bedroom doorway, hat in hand, his broad shoulders filling the frame. Dust still clung to his coat from the long ride he had taken to clear his head. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Cole's gaze dropped to the letter still clutched in Nora's fingers. Something tight crossed his face, regret maybe, or irritation. He had only wanted a practical wife to help run the ranch. Someone quiet. Someone who wouldn't ask too many questions. Not a wounded stranger dropped into his life by gunfire and bad luck. "I didn't ask for this," Nora said, her voice low but steady despite the fear twisting inside her. "I won't be anyone's burden. I'll find another way." Cole stepped closer, his boots quiet on the floorboards. "You're not leaving tonight? Not in your condition. Holt's men are still watching the roads." Nora looked away, jaw tight. She hated how small she felt, hated the tremble in her hands. She had promised herself after Thomas died that she would never again depend on a man's mercy. Yet here she was, bleeding broken and lying in a stranger's bed, because another man had decided to play hero. Cole rubbed the back of his neck, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I didn't expect any of this either. But I'm not the kind of man who puts a woman back on the street when she's hurt. You'll stay until you're stronger. That's all." The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither wanted to say. Then a smaller figure appeared in the doorway. A boy of about 12, skinny and freckled, carrying a tray with a bowl of thick stew and fresh bread. "Finn." His eyes widened when he saw Nora awake. "I brought supper, ma'am," he said softly, setting the tray on the small table beside the bed. "Mrs. Crane made it real careful so it wouldn't hurt your shoulder." Nora managed a weak nod. The boy lingered, shifting from foot to foot. "Mr. Mercer's a good man," Finn added quietly, almost like he was sharing a secret. "He's just been alone a long time since his sister Clara passed. The house gets awful quiet sometimes. But he's fair. And he don't yell." Cole shot the boy a look that was half warning, half resignation. Finn offered a small, shy smile before slipping back out of the room. Nora stared at the bowl of stew steam curling upward. Her stomach twisted, hunger and nausea fighting each other. She felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Everything she had believed in had turned to ash again. Cole stood there a moment longer, then placed his hat back on his head. "Rest," he said gruffly. "We'll talk more when you're stronger." He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. "And Mrs. Hayes?" He glanced back, gray eyes unreadable. "You're not a burden. Not yet, anyway." The door clicked shut behind him. Nora lay back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling, as Mrs. Lila Crane quietly adjusted the lamp. The wind moaned outside, rattling the window panes. Inside, the weight of betrayal pressed down on her chest until breathing hurt more than the wound in her shoulder. She had come west searching for safety. Instead, she had found another cage built of lies. Yet somewhere beneath the fear and shame, a small, stubborn spark refused to die. She was tired of running. Tired of being broken by other people's promises. This story reminds us that even when every door seems locked and every hope feels stolen, the deepest strength often begins in the quiet moment when we decide we will no longer let the world decide our worth. The days that followed moved like thick molasses, slow, heavy, and quietly painful. Nora Hayes grew stronger, inch by inch. Each morning she forced herself out of bed, ignoring the sharp pull in her shoulder. She helped Mrs. Lila Crane with small tasks, peeling potatoes, folding laundry, sweeping the wide plank floors of Cole Mercer's log house. Her hands stayed busy so her mind wouldn't wander back to Chicago to empty rooms and broken promises. But the silence in that house weighed on her. Cole spoke little. He left before dawn and returned after dark, shoulders tight, jaw set. Nora noticed how he avoided the main room some evenings, how he saddled his horse and rode alone toward the shadowed mountains. She had heard Mrs. Crane whisper once that Cole's wife had died of the fever years ago. The ranch had become his only companion since then, until Nora arrived like an unwelcome storm. One quiet afternoon, while dusting the bookshelf, Nora's fingers brushed against a small leather-bound notebook, tucked behind a row of old ledgers. Clara's handwriting, Cole's sister. The pages were filled with neat, careful notes about the ranch, the weather, and simple observations of daily life. The last entry, dated 2 years earlier, ended with a single line. Some walls are built to keep the cold out. Others are built so no one can see the emptiness inside. Nora sat down slowly on the wooden chair by the window. Something inside her chest shifted. She picked up the pencil lying beside the notebook and began to write. Not long letters, just short lines, the things she saw, the fear she carried, the way Cole's silence felt both protective and lonely. Writing turned her terror into something she could hold instead of something that held her. She kept the notebook hidden, but the act of filling its pages gave her a fragile sense of control. Late one afternoon, Sheriff Wade rode up to the porch. His face looked older than his years, lined with dust and worry. He spoke quietly with Cole on the front steps, while Nora watched from the doorway. "Holt's getting bolder," the sheriff said, voice low. "Those forged land papers aren't just about scaring off widows anymore. He's aiming for the whole North Valley. If he gets it, half the small ranches around Silver Creek will dry up and blow away." Cole's only reply was a short nod, but Nora saw the muscle jump in his jaw. When the sheriff rode off, Cole stood staring across the fields for a long time, hands clenched at his sides. That night, the first real blizzard of the season rolled down from the mountains without warning. The wind screamed like a living thing. Snow whipped sideways, turning the world white and blind. Cole had just come in from the barn when Finn burst through the door, coat half-buttoned, eyes wide with fear. The yearlings broke through the fence again, and the boy cried. "I went after the spotted one, but the storm hit too fast. I lost him, and now I can't find my way back to the herd." Cole grabbed his coat without a word. Nora stood up from the table, heart hammering. "I'm coming with you," she said. Cole turned, gray eyes flashing. "You're still healing? Stay inside." But Nora was already reaching for her heavy shawl and the lantern. "Finn is just a boy, and you can't search alone in this. Not if you want to find him before morning." For a moment, Cole looked like he might argue. Then something in her steady gaze made him pause. He gave one sharp nod. They rode out together into the howling dark, Cole on his big bay gelding, Nora behind him on a quieter mare lantern swinging from her good hand. Snow stung their faces like needles. The cold bit deep, finding every gap in their clothing. Finn Cole shouted into the wind. His voice disappeared almost instantly. Nora's shoulder throbbed with every step of the horse, but she kept her teeth clenched. She thought of Thomas again, how she had sat helpless beside his bed while he slipped away. She would not sit helpless tonight. They searched for what felt like hours. The world had narrowed to swirling white and the small circle of lantern light. Then Nora spotted something, a small dark shape, huddled against a rock outcropping. Over there, she called. They found Finn half buried in snow, shivering violently, lips blue. Cole swung down and gathered the boy into his arms, while Nora held the lantern steady. Back at the house, they built the fire high. Mrs. Lila Crane wrapped Finn in blankets and fed him warm broth. The boy eventually fell into exhausted sleep on the cot near the hearth. Cole and Nora sat on opposite sides of the stone fireplace, the only sound the crackle of burning wood and the roar of the storm outside. Cole stared into the flames for a long time before he spoke, voice rough and low. I lost my wife to fever. Then my sister Clara to the same damn sickness. After that, I told myself the ranch was enough. That silence was safer than caring too much. He paused, jaw working. Tonight, when I thought we might lose Finn. His eyes lifted to meet hers across the fire. I realized how tired I am of losing people. Nora swallowed hard. The notebook felt heavy in her pocket. I came here running from ghosts, too, she said quietly. My husband died slow. Everything we had was taken. I thought if I just got far enough away, the pain wouldn't follow. But it did. The fire popped softly. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like walls. It felt like space room enough for two broken people to breathe. Cole nodded once, slow and deliberate. Maybe some walls aren't meant to stay up forever, he murmured. Nora looked down at her hands, then back at him. Something fragile and new stirred in her chest, not hope exactly, but the possibility of it. Outside, the blizzard howled on. Inside, for the first time since she had stepped off that train, Nora Hayes felt the heavy silence beginning to crack. Just a little. This story shows us that real healing often starts in the quiet moments when two wounded souls finally choose to listen to each other instead of hiding behind their scars. The snow had been falling for 2 days straight, thick and relentless, burying the world in silence. Nora Hayes stood at the window of Cole Mercer's house, watching the flakes swirl against the glass. Something inside her had changed. She was no longer willing to be the woman who had bled in the dust at the train station. She was tired of waiting for someone else to fight her battles. Quietly, while Mrs. Lila Crane napped and Cole was out checking the fences, Nora made her decision. She slipped on her heavy coat, tucked Clara's old notebook deep into her pocket, and took the small, worn revolver that Mrs. Crane had pressed into her hands days earlier with a knowing look. Sometimes a woman needs more than prayers, the older woman had whispered. Nora stepped out into the storm alone. The wind hit her like a living wall. Snow stung her face and clung to her lashes as she trudged toward town. Her shoulders still ached with every step, but she kept moving. The notebook pressed against her chest like a shield. Inside its pages were her words, every fear, every lie she had uncovered about Rancher Holt's forged land deeds. Today she would hand them to Sheriff Wade herself. She would no longer hide. Cole returned to the house earlier than expected, stamping snow from his boots. The moment he stepped inside, the emptiness hit him. Mrs. Crane looked up from the stove, worry etched across her face. "She's gone," she said simply. "Took the old colt with her." Cole's heart slammed against his ribs. For a second he couldn't breathe. The same cold fear that had gripped him the night they lost Finn now returned sharper, deeper. Nora had become more than an unwanted responsibility. Somewhere between her quiet writing at the window and the way she had faced the blizzard to save a boy, she had woken something in him he thought had died years ago. He grabbed his coat and rifle. "Finn," he called. "Saddle the horses. We're going after her." The boy didn't hesitate. They rode hard into the whiteout wind screaming around them. Cole's mind raced with every possible danger. Holt's men, the deep drifts, the cold that could kill faster than any bullet. Meanwhile, Nora had almost reached the edge of town when two riders emerged from the swirling snow like ghosts. Rancher Holt's men. They blocked her path on the narrow trail leading up to the sheriff's office. Well, look who decided to wander out alone. One of them sneered his horse dancing sideways in the storm. "You should have stayed in Mercer's house where you belong, widow." Nora's hands trembled inside her gloves, but she lifted her chin. The old fear rose fast, and ugly memories of being powerless, of losing everything. But this time, she refused to let it win. She pulled the revolver from her coat with steady hands. The two men laughed. "You gonna shoot us, little lady?" Nora didn't aim at them. She raised the gun toward the gray sky and fired. The single shot cracked loud and sharp, cutting through the howl of the wind. Snow exploded off a nearby pine branch. The sound echoed across the hills like a declaration. "I'm done running," she said, voice clear despite the shaking in her chest. "And I'm done being afraid of men like Holt." The men exchanged uneasy glances. Before they could move closer, the thunder of approaching hooves broke through the storm. Cole Mercer rode into view, Finn close behind. He pulled his horse to a stop beside Nora, rifle ready but not raised. His eyes found hers through the driving snow. He didn't push in front of her. He didn't try to take the gun from her hand. Instead, he positioned his horse shoulder to shoulder with hers and spoke in a low, steady voice that carried just far enough. "You heard the lady." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind and the nervous shifting of the hired men's horses. Then the two riders backed away slowly, cursing under their breath, and disappeared back into the white curtain of snow. Nora's arm slowly lowered. The revolver felt impossibly heavy now. Her breath came in short, visible puffs. She had done it. She had stood. Cole turned to her. Snow clung to his dark lashes and the brim of his hat. His voice was rough with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I thought I'd lost you out here." Nora met his gaze, her own eyes bright with unshed tears and something fiercer. "I wasn't waiting to be saved this time, Cole." He nodded slowly, understanding passing between them like a quiet vow. "I see that now." They rode back together through the storm, Cole, Nora, and Finn, the three of them moving as one small, determined line against the overwhelming white. When they finally reached the house, Mrs. Lila Crane had the fire roaring and hot coffee waiting. Later that night, after Finn had gone to bed, Cole and Nora sat once more by the hearth. The storm still raged outside, but inside the walls, something had shifted forever. Cole looked at her across the dancing flames. "You didn't need me to catch you this time," he said quietly. Nora's fingers traced the edge of Clara's notebook in her lap. "No," she answered, voice soft but sure. "But I'm glad you stood beside me." For the first time, Cole reached across the space between them and took her hand. Not to hold her up, not to protect her, just to stand with her. This story teaches us that true strength begins the moment we stop waiting for someone to rescue us and choose instead to stand up even when our hands are shaking and the storm is at its worst. Spring arrived in Silver Creek like a quiet promise finally kept. The snow melted into rushing streams and the hills turned soft green under warm Montana sunshine. Sheriff Wade had wasted no time. With Nora's written testimony and every careful entry from Clara's old notebook, he built an unbreakable case. Rancher Holt's forged land papers his threats, and his greed were dragged into the open for the whole territory to see. One clear morning, deputies rode out and arrested Holt at his own front gate. The man who had ruled through fear stood silent as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The stolen public land was returned to the families who had earned it with honest sweat and calloused hands. For the first time in years, the people of Silver Creek could breathe without looking over their shoulders. Cole Mercer stood on the porch that day and watched the riders disappear down the valley road. When he turned back, Nora was waiting in the doorway, sunlight catching in her hair. He crossed the distance between them slowly. "I'm not asking you to stay out of duty anymore," he said, voice low and steady. "I'm asking because I want you here. Because watching you fight for yourself and for all of us. Woke something in me I thought was gone forever. Nora looked up at him, her hazel eyes searching his face. She saw no pity there, only deep, quiet respect. And something warmer, something that made her heart ache in the best possible way. I'm not running anymore either, she whispered. Not from you, not from this life. Cole reached for her hand, and this time she met him halfway. They married on a gentle spring afternoon beside the clear waters of Silver Creek. No grand ceremony, just a simple gathering under the cottonwoods. Mrs. Lila Crane stood as witness, her eyes shining with quiet pride. Finn stood tall beside Cole, looking every bit the son he had become in their hearts. Preacher Reed spoke the vows in a calm, steady voice that carried over the flowing river. Nora wore a simple dress the color of morning sky. When Cole slipped the plain gold band onto her finger, his hand was warm and sure. The kiss they shared was gentle, full of promise, and the kind of certainty that only comes after walking through fire together. The years that followed arrived one season at a time. Mercer Ranch grew, but not just in cattle or land. It became a place where broken people could find rest. Widows who arrived with nothing but fear found work and dignity. Orphaned boys like Finn discovered they had a family again. Nora and Cole opened their doors and their hearts without fanfare, letting actions speak louder than words. In the quiet evenings, Nora sat at the desk by the window and wrote. Honest stories about life on the frontier, the fear, the loss, the slow rebuilding of trust. She sent them east to editor Grace, who published them with care. Letters soon arrived from women across the country, saying Nora's words had given them courage to take their own first steps. One golden afternoon, years later, Nora stood on the wide front porch, one hand resting gently on her rounded belly. The baby would come before summer ended. She watched the lights stretch long across the valley. Cole stepped up behind her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, pulling her back against his chest. His chin rested lightly on her hair. Finn, now taller, stronger, and still full of that same quiet loyalty, walked ahead with little Ruth toddling beside him. The 4-year-old girl laughed as she chased a butterfly near the riverbank, her small hand reaching up to hold Finn's fingers. Nora felt Cole's steady heartbeat against her back. She thought of the woman who had once stepped off a dusty train into blood and bullets. She thought of the fear that had nearly swallowed her whole. And she thought of the man who had not tried to fix her, but simply stood beside her until she remembered how to stand on her own. I used to believe home was a place I had to reach, she said softly. Now I know it's something we build. One honest day at a time. Cole pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice rough with emotion. You are home, Nora. The wind carried the sound of Ruth's laughter across the grass. The river sparkled in the late sunlight. And in that quiet moment, with Cole's arms around her and their children playing nearby, Nora Hayes, now Nora Mercer, felt the last heavy chains of the past finally fall away. Justice had not come from loud gunfire or powerful men. It had come from the courage to trust again, from the willingness to heal, and from 2 scarred hearts that chose every single day to build something deeper than blood. Something rooted in love, respect, and quiet strength. This story reminds us that real justice and lasting peace are rarely won with force. They are born instead from the brave choice to trust, to heal, and to build a new life from the broken pieces we thought could never be mended. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories. From our hearts to yours, thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals narration and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.